Hey, everybody, you're listening and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos of varying degrees that read comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in or to tune in as we're doing this right now. And we have been a podcast at this point for 8 years. Our first show was in April, actually, almost exactly 8 years. Our first show was in April of 2008. No, 2012. Sorry, terrible math. And we come to you. It was on a monthly basis, pretty much. We had cut down to. But since we've been sequestered, we decided to go back to a weekly podcast. And believe me, folks, we kind of need this. So we're very happy that you decided to tune in tonight. There's a lot of viewing choices out there. And if you did, there's us. Okay. So we're each going to tell a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll go into the show. As you heard in the introductions, I'm Bill Zanowitz. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I currently live in the Princeton University area. And I am a graduate of the University of Delaware and Rutgers School of Law. Law school figures in with somebody else too on the call, and I can actually pinpoint a date where I became, if not a comics fan, a fan of superheroes, and that was September 8th, 1973, which was the premiere of Super Friends. I was one little kid at the beginning of that hour, another little kid at the end. And since then, though there have been times where I've kind of abandoned comics, I basically have been a fan my entire life. And I'll throw it over to our second oldest survivor, and that's Bryan. So, Bryan, tell us about yourself.
I survived podcasting. My name's Bryan Pittard. I have had the good fortune of being able to podcast with Bill and our other compatriots for this however many now years, 8 years. I actually met Bill for the first time at MegaCon, which they are still advertising for. Somehow they're going to figure out a way to pull it off.
Yeah.
Not in the original day. Anyway, so I'm from Orlando. We met in MegaCon. You came up to me after a nerdy show, live panel, something or other that we did. Yeah. Nerdy Show Network, now called Omniverse, was the podcasting network that my second podcast started on, called Flame On. So some of you may have come from that. We posted that today. But so yeah, you're like, hey, we should podcast. And I said, absolutely, let's podcast, because I love talking, love hearing myself talk, I guess. I actually put most of my show Flame On and then the show before together out of people I knew in comics that were in Orlando at a comic shop, which is still open and selling everything on their Facebook Live auction. But I've been reading comics since I was in high school. Got in a little late in the 90s, right at the perfect moment to buy multiple copies of Image #1s and other random, horribly marketed, lenticular and foil covered, abominations now. I just sold.
Put you through college.
Yeah, they're gonna totally. My dad. Oh, it's an investment, Dad. It's an investment. Sure. I did actually sell my collection, and when I moved, so I actually live in the Seattle area now, and I moved out here. I sold all of my comics minus a short box. So I sold it to a comic shop who are now selling it on their live auction in pieces, and it's hilarious seeing my old issues be sold live. But whatever. So I still read comics, and I am thrilled to be a part of this and to talk about comics. But I don't own as many, and I feel sort of naked sometimes and sort of missing out. But that doesn't stop me. So anyway, that's enough about me.
All right, Steve. Give me your 411.
Well, hi, I'm Steve. I like how Bill gave his complete CV. So I
I'm
went
so
to.
used to that. I'm sorry.
I graduated from McGill University up in Montreal, Canada. I did some graduate work at University of Connecticut and out in Universität Konstanz in Germany. Like my comic history, I first probably was exposed to comics, much like you, Bill, on TV, seeing some reruns. because when I was a kid, they were reruns. They weren't live, or they weren't new, of the Super Friends, and also Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and even Incredible Hulk. Seeing that live show, or that live action show when I was a kid. Actually, reading comics, I had a few issues of X-Men, a few issues of Spider-Man and Superman. Some of them were reprints in some form or fashion that they sold at Toys R Us and Walden Books and things like that. But I got into superhero comics pretty big in the early '90s, like Bryan. I enjoyed collecting and investing in those very sought after gold foil and holograph in embossed issue number ones from Image, and of course Marvel was doing the same thing, and so was DC, and so was basically everything else that was being thrown on the shelves. But I got out of comics just like Bill had mentioned. I kind of fell out of superhero comics. I'd been kind of going on this trajectory with all the big superhero names, and then once I realized how much money I was spending and how little I was enjoying the stories, I started discovering some more indie type of stuff. Discovered Vertigo. I discovered a whole bunch of other cool stuff that was not superhero related, really. And I kind of read a lot of Fantagraphics through high school and through college. And in 2011, I decided that I was going to get back into comics hardcore by reading Jeff Johns' entire Green Lantern saga from Rebirth, the original Rebirth, all the way through Blackest Night and Brightest Day. And then, of course, just in time for the New 52 to happen and throw all of that continuity out the window. But I've been reading comics since, and I think much more diverse in my taste than I was when I was, a 10-year-old kid. So that's me.
Okay, and now throw it over to our sleeveless gladiator over there, Caleb.
Hey guys, I'm from Arkansas, as you might be able to discern from my very, very thick accent. I got my start in comics as a little guy. I remember some of my earliest memories sitting in my grandfather's lap and reading the funny papers on Sunday morning before when we go to church. So I actually I got my start in the strips. Set the love of sequential art, just that connection I had with him. But I really got into what we call, comics in the format that we know them, probably in the mid 2000s, 99, 2000. I had braces, and so I grew up way out in the country in rural Arkansas, where there are no comic shops. And so once I got to come to the booming metropolis that is Little Rock, which is a small town by most people's standards, but it's the closest thing we have here. And I'd get to go to the bookstore while we went to get my braces and all that fun stuff. And I what would one day become my favorite run in comics. And that's the Kurt Busiek, George Perez. It's where I fell in love with that team. It's where I fell in love with George Perez. His artwork, Kurt Busiek's writing, everything about that was just magical in a way, and it really locked me into the medium. I took a break just like everybody else did, somewhere in the mid 2000s, where Bendis really got his launch. I wasn't there for all of that, but I came back. I came back around 2012. I had my 20s were spent mostly on the back of a Harley, and so riding everywhere and doing all kinds of construction work. And so I had a really bad wreck and couldn't do stuff for a while. So I was living in Georgia at the time, and I was dating this really cute little blonde bear cub that I met at the time, and he was living in Arkansas, and he would come and see me while I was hobbled up, and we found a comic shop. He started giving me stuff to read, or I think I went there beforehand, right before the wreck. And anyway, he made sure I had comics. Since then, I subsequently married that guy. He was a keeper, and he took care of me. But that got me back into comics, kind of hardcore. Things went well with him, as you might imagine. He convinced me to stop working construction and move back to Arkansas, where we got married. Just I decided to go back to school. I graduated with my degree in English and creative writing from the University of Arkansas in Little. Because I have a sticky note on my desk that says "Be Bill" one day. I decided to go to law school. So, and I'm now trying to get my JD. Long story short, with that, I do a lot of volunteer work with a group here in Little Rock called the Van. We're a mobile outreach for the homeless community. For those people who live, that got me wanting to be into the practice of law. So I want to go help those people use the law instead of have the law be really punitive and keep them outside. So now I just kind of read comics and do my own thing. I co-host another podcast, Southern Fried Geekery. We drop new episodes every Sunday on our own thing. We're not technologically savvy, so we hadn't figured out this whole live stream thing. So you just get to put us in your and do with that what you will.
Okay. Why don't we just make sure everybody knows what we're wearing, because it's that's just as diverse of what we're talking about. I have an Ireland shirt, and despite the last name, I actually am a quarter Irish. So, my mother's mother from County Cork. Yep. And Bryan, you got Squirrel Nut Zippers there, huh?
That's right. Oh, my favorite album, which is oh my god, my brain's not working hot. It's the one that Hell is featured on. If you haven't heard of the Squirrel Nut Zippers, I mean, I understand they're not putting out a lot of music, but they actually are putting out new music. So if you like sort of swing band, jazz, I don't even know what else, eclectic, you should check them out.
I tried to grab a disc of this, but it's way over there.
In the giant collection.
Yeah. Can you tell I like music too? Yeah. All right, Steve, show us what you got.
Well, this one, if you can't see, is basically a cute little flurkin. He's meowing. He's turning into a giant tentacle beast, and he's meowing and licking his paw. Aw. So Flurkin's, of course, from Captain Marvel, the movie and the comic.
Okay, and Caleb, what you got on there?
So my shirt is it's I think one of my only DC shirts. It's a really sexy man making out, and I don't know if you can actually see the bottom of it. Says "Love and Love is Love." I actually shirt when the graphic novel. What's the word? Whatever word I'm looking for. The book came out after Orlando. They sold this shirt through kind of a similar to money for the victims and their families. So I found this shirt online and bought it. Number one, it's an awesome shirt, but number two, it went to a good cause. And first thing I did was cut the sleeves out of it because if you're that's it. If you don't have that, seek it out, find it. It's amazing art, amazing stories, and still. But yeah, got the shirt, cut the sleeves off of it because I have to make up for my lack of beard somehow. So I have tattoo and funky shirts. I'm the hairless baby bear of the group. So.
Okay, quickly, Bryan, I got to ask you something. I saw your stacks over there. The book that's laying on top that's yellow and red, is that Last Night at DJ Saved My Life?
Yes, it is.
Oh my God! Okay, man, I can tell my rock books.
That's
okay.
that's pretty great, man. That's skill. Appreciate that.
That is cool. A great book if you want to learn about the history of dance music and discotheques. It's really cool. Tangents, sorry, but if you ever listened to the show before, you'll know that we're full of them. So what we wanted to do, because again, YouTube tends to be a very different audience from the regular podcasting audience. We wanted to talk about books that if you weren't used to comics, and again, we would try to get friends to tune in and stream as we're doing this, and some of them are not actually comic book people, so we wanted to provide some recommendations for people in regards to books that we think might be a very good jumping on point. I probably should go first because my pick is first of all the earliest in time, and also probably the most conventional, so I'll do that. And my pick, if you want to get into comics, This is the original hardcover of Batman Year One. And as we checked before we started recording this trade is actually this hardcover is actually older than Caleb, and it collects 4 issues that appeared in the regular Batman comic book in the 80s, right after the groundbreaking Dark Knight Returns series that Frank Miller had written and drawn. In 1986, DC kind of did an overhaul of their 3 major characters, with Superman uh, being relaunched by John Byrne, with Wonder Woman being relaunched by George Perez, and being provided a new origin story written by Frank Miller with this amazing art by David Mazzucchelli. There's not David Mazzucchelli is not exactly a very prolific artist, so uh, you had to ping me while we're doing this. So this is a really good book for a conventional superhero. Now, though I'm a DC guy, I'm not the biggest Batman fan in the world. There's dozens of heroes I'll take before
I
him.
don't think I realized that, Bill. That's
Well,
controversial there.
oh no, I'm not a Batman guy. Like, I am by default by being a DC guy. But if I had to pick like a 10 favorites, there's no way he'd be in it. It's just something about the character doesn't appeal to me as much as some others, including Nightwing,
Oh,
including Dick Grayson. So Dick
well,
Grayson,
that ass. I mean, come on.
yeah,
It's all about that ass, really. When it
yeah,
comes to Dick.
and no other reasons for that. Yeah, but apart from an origin story for Batman, it also serves as an origin story for Catwoman. It provides the introduction of James Gordon into the Gotham City Police Force, and it's also 4 issues, so it's a pretty quick read. But in terms of conventional storytelling, I don't think you can beat this in terms of superhero books. So that's my pick if somebody wants to jump in, and that's Batman Year One. So I guess the next in time would be, ooh, God, I guess maybe Caleb. I don't know what the when that originally came out. Trying to look here. Oh no, later. So Steve, you're next.
Oh, we're going. So since we're going by publication date, I guess.
Yeah. Steve, you're next.
So one of the things, and I was kind of thinking about this as well. Like most people, I got introduced to comic books through the superhero genre, like capes. Everybody in big tights, big boobs, big muscles, everything. Like that's kind of what a lot of people think of. If they're not comic book readers, that's what they think of comic books. Very colorful and flashy, and heroes, villains, everything's very black and white, even though it's very colorful. And one of the things that happened to me is that I got introduced to that, I jumped into that, and then got, I guess, overdosed on it, and wanted to find something else that was very different, something that was, to me, I think maybe more literary, more coming from, I guess, a prose background, something that would speak to that side of me, maybe a little bit more experimental in the artwork even. And that's when I discovered, and obviously, a lot of people discover these differently, but I discovered Sandman. This right here is the first collection. It's issues 1 through 8, Preludes and Nocturnes. And Neil Gaiman, of course, for those of you, these guys have the massive absolute versions of these, which, they are beautiful. They look amazing on a shelf, and can cause some damage if you drop them on your foot. But if you buy them in individual trades, this is the first story arc for what it is, and it sets up the entire universe of Sandman. So it sets up the main character, Sandman himself, and he basically just goes through his adventures, getting back some of his tokens of power, so to speak, after being captured for almost 100 years. And it's for such a very interesting setup. The way that Neil Gaiman, as the author, presents it goes through an evolution, and you can tell, with his background, not just in music criticism and prose, and also, Yep. And also, other superhero comics like Miracle Man in the UK. He really creates this character and builds on this character in a way that's wholly unique, I think, for DC at the time, and it became part of one of the big launching titles for Vertigo. Um, but Neil Gaiman as the author, even the artwork, of course, Sam Keith, Mike Dringenberg, Malcolm Jones III. It's very beautiful, very interesting. And then, of course, you've got the Dave McKean, who does the cover work for basically every issue. But anyway, I love it. I think it's wonderful. And if you're interested in something different other than capes, give it a shot.
All right. We're moving over to Caleb for the next entry.
All right. Somebody in the chat said I was kind of choppy-tized and weird sounding. So if that's the case, I apologize. I don't know why. Technical errors. We'll figure this out as we go. But so when this was kind of posed to us, one of the things Bill said was something that kind of introduced people to comics. And I started thinking about all the things that I've read that would serve as good introductory points to the different shared universes, and kind of what we think of as capes and type comics, or even image books, things like Why the Last Man and stuff. Look over to my bookshelf and I found this sitting there. And if you want to know, Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics is I can think of very few other things that teach you how to read comics as well as this. I mean, and it goes beyond, you read from, left to right on this and these things. This teaches you how to understand shapes, understand lines. It teaches you to understand the tone of what color work does. One of the things that really goes into help me immensely was to understand symbolism and what comics can do that no other man. And for somebody like me who is interested more plot, I'm interested more than just the shared universe or the story. I'm interested in the mechanism, the delivery mechanism, so to speak, of how comics. This book is priceless, and he has another one, Making Comics, that works really well too. But this one, that one's geared more towards, I think, people who want to. Yeah, there you go. People who want to do it themselves. This is more of the science of what comics can be and what they are, and it really breaks it down to the bare bones, the molecules of what they and my degree is in writing. It's in English, and the craft of what makes communication work is something that I find very titillating and enticing. So I can't recommend this book enough. And if you haven't read it, your local comic shop has it. They have it all day on Amazon. They even have it in kind of non-comic shops. Barnes and Noble will have this everywhere. And so check it out because it will really broaden your horizons, I think, of what comics can be and what they are.
Okay, Bryan, you're up next.
So this was sort of a last second Hail Mary kind of idea, but if you are a listener to our podcast, you might have heard me talk about a certain artist who I enjoy, and that person's name is Ramon Perez. Ramon is a very talented Canadian, lives in Toronto, and the book that I chose, Tale of Sand, is probably the book that he is most critically known for, because it is a book that he brought out through Archaea, and he did not write this. This is adapted from a Jim Henson script that was never filmed. So I say that nice. I say that only because he has written his own comics, and they're excellent. But most of his stuff is illustrated, and he did pencil and ink this. Although I think he did some work where there was another colorist involved. But this book is beautiful in many ways. It is a love letter to the project that Jim Henson intended to film. I chose it as a first story, first comic, because it is one of those books that is lightly, what would you call, lightly scripted. There's not a lot of dialogue, very, very much visual storytelling. And comics, when I think of comics at their best, are when they are visually motivated with prose, but less full pages like sometimes like Grant Morrison or other people like to do in there, which is fine. But I think comics at its strongest is a visual storytelling medium. So again, as a first comic, I feel like this fits the bill pretty well. There is dialogue. It's not like completely unscripted. And what I love is it goes through this story of this sort of everyman living an existence that he doesn't really understand. It's a little bit surreal. And at the time, Henson was kind of doing some rather surrealist work in film. Yeah, it's beautiful. I actually own one page of it. Let me see. Let's see if this is visual medium and all. Let's see if I can pull this down. So I actually own this page from it. This is the original art that Ramon did. I forgot what page number it is. 122. It was one of the so some of the pages are double page spread. Some of them are mixed media. It's very hard when you get into original comic art to find a piece that is both it really speaks to you, but it's also reasonably priced. And I haven't kept up with it. Well, yeah, I assume it's going to get even more and more rare and expensive. Anyway, I was very fortunate to get it for a reasonable price. And this book, it literally is probably my favorite graphic novel. Ramon is actually I've met him many times now. Not enough, of course. We've never gone drinking, and that's really the sad thing, because he's a big old nerd, loves Farscape, which is my favorite sci-fi show. Also a Henson creation, though not Jim, the Henson Company. But I've got it at least autographed, and he did a little sketch of the main character in it. So this is like one of my most prized possessions. The story is very simple. It's nothing that you'd have to know anything about to go into it. So it's standalone, which is also nice to give as a first time issue. I have to see if it's still in print, but I'd be surprised if it's not. And it's certainly available digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
actually how I have it. Yeah.
There's a companion volume too. I don't know if I can pull it down at the moment. But there is a companion volume where he goes through and he does the script, and then he does illustrations around the script. So it sort of explains some of his choices and kind of gives you a nice comparison between the two. But yeah, Tale of Sand, Archaea, now Boom, Ramon Perez, highly recommended. Intro to comics, and really one of a masterclass in visual storytelling for any comic books. I would love to actually do someday a little lecture sort of thing with the Scott McCloud and this, because I feel like this would be a great way to illustrate a lot of the concepts in that book. You know what I mean? Because he goes through the different levels of realism and versus cartooning and all of the perspective, all of the stuff. So that'd be a real fun project. We should, I don't know, maybe someday.
Okay. All right. So we know who Bryan's big creator crush is. If you've listened to this show, you know who my big creator crush is, and that's Matt Wagner. But Steve Caleb, I'm not sure who you guys have. So,
I mean,
if you've even ever thought about this,
it's a hard question. I mean, as for, I've got a couple creator crushes, a couple. Anything by Rafer Roberts, I immediately love, and actually having met him, I think he's absolutely dreamy. And then also Kyle Starks, because he's hilarious. His work is just funny and unique, and in person, he's just infectiously fun and joyful and adorable. So,
okay. Caleb?
Boy, I might have to meet these people one day. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough question, and partially because I'm thinking of people that with comics creators, a lot of times we don't know what they look like. I think, oh boy, Scotty is a heck of a little, very attractive man. and I think what as attractive is how animated he is in. Yeah, I like off the top of my head, that's what I'll go with. I'll just say Scott, and plus, I get a big hug from Scotty every time I see him at a con, so he'll just, if he hears this, he'll be like, I knew.
That's why he always goes for hugs.
Okay, well, Bryan, should I try to bring somebody in?
Yes, I think if that works, we should do that.
Okay, let's see if this works. We weren't expecting this at the beginning of the show.
Surprises.
Ooh.
Let's see. Let's see if this works.
The power of the internet.
It's working.
Let's
Maybe.
see.
Watch
Great
his
video. Yeah.
yeah. So I asked in the chat room what picks people had for this topic, the first sort of first issue or trade, and Bryan Newberry said for a non-superhero he recommends a Sunbeam or On a Sunbeam. Sorry.
There he is.
Uh-oh.
Matt!
We've been joined by one of our former co-hosts, Matt Brossard. Hey Matt.
Everybody.
Tiger now.
It's very now. It's very 2020.
How soon is now?
Oh.
So Matt, tell us how you doing.
I'm doing pretty good. I have figured out how to do workouts from home. I am getting some reading done. I work from home, and I'm distracting myself with the new Final Fantasy, which showed up on my doorstep today.
Isn't it gorgeous?
It's a lot more than I was expecting.
Oh my God, they've done so much. It's insane. I'm like 10 hours in, and it's a roller coaster.
Jesus.
That must be so nice to have a PS4.
Oh,
Play it on. I have to wait.
Oh, sorry.
What? You got a lot of cartridges behind there, you son.
Oh, those are for all of my old systems.
Okay.
The Xbox 360s and the PS2s and the PS3s and the DSs and all that stuff. But
Foreign
I
language.
don't have a PS4. I just figure I'll wait for the PS5. Get that one.
So Matt and I are now not quite neighbors, but there is a way that I will see his face once this quarantine is lifted.
Right. It's a really short trip. It goes right from Seattle Harbor to practically a couple of blocks away from here. So
I'm so excited to
very
go to
convenient.
Victoria. We were going to go to the comic. What was the name of was it Victoria Comic Con?
it's called Capital City Comic Con.
Yeah, I was going to plan to go up there and we're going to run around. And then we didn't get to go because they canceled, right? But you still did your cosplay, right?
Yeah. So I volunteered to be like staff at the event, and up until about 6 days before the event, they still hadn't started to lock things down here in Victoria. And so I thought, the news is sort of escalating, and we're still supposed to do this event. And then earlier that week, they announced that they were going to cancel the comic book convention. But I had this great Death Stranding costume, and it's made out of cardboard, and it's not going to last another year. So I just put it on one weekend and went down to the docks and posed next to one of the ships that was in the port. And it kind of looks a little bit like a section of the game when you're in a city called Port Knot City. And it was kind of fun. The security guard thought I was bonkers, but at least I got to put it on and walk around for a while.
Now that I've been playing Death Stranding, I actually got the costume. But when you posted it, I was like, what? Anyway, it was great.
What do you think of the game?
I think it's a very, very, very interesting, boring world. If somebody had told me when I watched the first trailer that it was going to be basically playing an Uber Eats, Instacart, whatever delivery person, I don't know if I would have been as interested.
Yes, but it's a delivery person with like a weird stillborn-ish baby that's like strapped to your chest.
It's literally that idea plus the whole world plus Guillermo del Toro likeness that's pushing me, and Mads Mikkelsen pushing me through what
the
is otherwise a very boring game.
the Bionic Woman
Oh yeah, Lindsay
herself.
Wagner, absolutely, no, of
Lindsay
course.
Wagner in multiple roles, or possibly the same role.
It's a weird game.
She comes across more as like Trisha Heffler
Yes.
from Battlestar Galactica.
Mhm.
Like the entire game, I never once saw a acting sequence where I thought that's Lindsay Wagner, and instead it just felt like Battlestar Galactica all the way through.
Yeah, I was thinking it was her at first, and then I was like Lindsay Wagner. And then I love. This is the only thing we should talk about. We should move on. But you're walking through this wasteland of this weird world, and then a pop song comes on the radio that you're somehow listening to, and it's like this weird music video at that point. But again, very boring, very beautiful, but very boring. It's a weird game. I am fascinated by how bizarre the choices and how mainstream it was and how big of a release it's a fascinating project. Anyway,
if you get far enough in the game where you unlock the inspirations, it makes a little bit more sense, at least in the idea that it's like a formula where you added things like glass sculpture and fossils and World War II and and when you're playing the game you're just like where are all these random flavors coming from, but at the very end when you can see like where the creators drew their inspiration from, it kind of makes just a modicum more sense.
Well, I'm excited. But yeah, we were talking before you jumped in and joined us. We were talking about our favorite like intro to comics book, trade, whatever. Totally unprepared. Do you have a recommendation?
Like for somebody who is young or our age or what?
Any whatever.
Yeah, I don't think we really took that into consideration. Yeah.
Recently, I gave a copy of Thor: The Mighty Avenger to my boss to give to his son, who's probably about 6 or 7 years old, and he's loving that book. So I feel like that was a good choice. He actually they sent me a little thank you video asking me what the name of the dragon was, and Fin Fang Foom shows up partway through the series. So when I told them what the name of the dragon was, they all laughed, and they thought like that guy knows some weird stuff about comics.
That was Roger Langridge.
Yeah, Landry. Yeah.
He did he write and draw or just draw? I'm trying to remember now.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, because I know a lot of the stuff that he's done, like the Muppet comic, was him writing and drawing.
The Muppet comic was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the case with the Marvel stuff.
Are you talking about who are the creators on Thor: The Mighty Avenger?
Yeah.
That's Mark Waid and Chris Samney.
Oh, that was Samney, not Langridge. Oh, okay, yeah. So
yeah, okay.
Samney and Langridge have a very similar. I want to say that Langridge did do a Thor thing maybe later, but
he definitely did. It's like a young Thor, and it was like it was an all ages book, so that's
okay.
Why
that's why I'm
there.
Crossing wires.
So we're on the same wavelength, Brian. No, we're thinking of
the same wavelength. The wrong wavelength, but the same one.
We're multiples of each other. We're harmonizing. It's okay. It's fine. Oh, also, go ahead.
The other thing I've had an easy time passing off on my family is work by Tom King. So Mr. Miracle and more recently The Vision. Both of those went over really well with my brother-in-law.
Did anybody pick up the Strange Adventures before the freeze, the whatever?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Like Tom King and oh god, what's his name? You just said it.
Well, it's two artists.
Right.
You have Mark Shaner and you have Mitch Garrard.
They're killing it.
Mitch from Mr. Miracle, but since there's actions that takes place on Earth and on Ran, they split the duties.
Those two were made to do. It's phenomenal.
I just hope because I saw the thing today that Marvel is ceasing work on many projects or whatever, and I think DC had sort of taken that same. I think Marvel's doing it like don't get too far ahead, like stop.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is depressing.
Yeah. With DC, they've moved a bunch of artists onto a new Batman black and white digital series
Hmm.
to keep people busy, so that they have some
That's
kind of
good.
publication output. And considering how good some of those old Batman black and white stories are, I'll be interested to see what comes across. But yeah, we talked about that last time, that you're probably going to be seeing a lot of cancellations and resolicitations soon. But
Yeah.
We'll hold out.
we're in new terrain here. So
Also from the chat room, Hassan said that Criminal would be his recommendation for intro to trade.
oh, okay.
Also, really
shit.
good non superhero kind of like, because a lot of people, I think, they get the superhero idea. It may not be
Yeah.
the best gateway to
Mhm.
reach the non people. And then Dave Abersol's in the chat. I told him we were just talking about Dash the other day. If you don't know, Dave is the creator writer of the Northwest Press Dash, and it sounds like there's some new stuff coming. So I'm very excited. I think we're all very excited to see that.
Great.
Very.
We've had a lot of Northwest Press talk in the last 3 shows.
Admittedly, that's partly my fault because I have been reinterested now living in the Northwest, but also reminded because of that. And it's just there's so much good stuff that over the years, I don't know if it's gotten enough bandwidth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, if you go on the Northwest Press site, you can still pick up Power. And that just coincidentally has a story that was written by me and drawn by that gentleman from Canada. So,
I was going to pull that off my shelf, but I don't know where it is. I know I have it.
Shameless plug.
It's somewhere in there, or in there.
So, Bryan, do you want to attempt this thing where you throw you show us some?
There's the Muppet Show thing.
Yeah, I just saw that, but yeah. So
if you want to show us some indie comics or whatever comics you have on hand, and we can talk about what we think of them, if we even know about them.
Do we want to go do you want to ease into it, or do you want to go like deep in and then back? Because I can do both.
You know me, I always take the conservative approach. So,
all right.
What's the most obscure thing you got? Give it to me.
This probably isn't the most conservative way to go, but it's not. It's a good middle ground, let's say. So this is Multiple Warheads by Brandon Graham, and we've talked about Brandon Graham's work on the show a long time ago with oh my gosh, what's Prophet. So for those of us who started comics in the 90s, we remember the Prophet series that Rob Liefeld created at Image back in the late 90s.
Really?
That was not all that good. The original version of him.
That even sucked for Extreme stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I went back, and as I was going through and selling my stuff off, I went and flipped through a couple. I was like, oh, this is bad. But so Brandon Graham and Simon Roy were two creators they brought in from just out there in the sort of indie ether, and had them do, and this is not what this is, but had them do a restart, sort of a continuation, really, of Prophet. And it was so out there in a fantastic way, and sci-fi storytelling, bold choices, foreign worlds, but it did all knit together with the original story to some extent. And I mean, it was lovely. I never finished it. For some reason, I missed the last part of this epic, but I guess you can get the trade is like a hardcover. It collects everything. I need to do that. But I mean, I think I know Matt, we've talked about this in the past.
Yeah, I've got all of the collections. I don't have a hardcover, but the last collection I think was called Earth War, and it's sort of like the culmination of the battle. And I think it's a little shorter. I think it's only like five issues.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was a nice sort of. I'm not sure if it's truly the end of the series, but it's satisfying.
Well,
Yeah.
they kind of stopped for multiple reasons, I think. But so Multiple Warheads is Brandon Graham's one of his ongoing sort of stories, and he, I think, started it outside of anything, and then he continued it through Island, which was sort of a 2000 AD anthology series that Image put out for a while that Brandon actually was one of the curators for. And then this actually, Ghost Thrones continued it. And sort of, I think, ended it to a point. But again, it's sort of an ongoing sort of epic. And the thing about Brandon's art is it's squishy. Like, I would say you could say it's thick with two C's because there's definitely some heft on some characters that's visually appealing, but it's just very on the Scott McCloud continuum, and I'm doing this from memory. It's far more on the cartoony side of the continuum, and he writes and he draws everything and inks and everything. He does all of it himself, and like it's sort of surreal. Like it also reminds me of the Inkles from Jodorowsky and other artists. In fact, one of them just passed away recently. Do you guys remember? I can't. He's South American, I believe. Yeah, one of the artists who did some of the work with Jodorowsky. Anyway,
okay.
So surreal,
Sort of ringing.
sci-fi-ish, but sci-fi in a sort of fun, familiar way. It's also not super serious. It's squishy. It's sexy. It's funny. There's a lot of visual puns, onomatopoeia in the panels. A lot of fun in this issue or this particular story. There's a lot of fun panel play, if you will. Panel play, is that a new kink? I think we just made that up. But no, I mean I can sort of like show you some of the art. I have another thing I want to show you of Brandon's here in a minute, but if you're watching on the YouTubes here, you can sort of see some of the characters are just like they're really squishy, organic, and again, it's consistent with his work and his style that he's done for years. Sexica is the main character here. That's who that is, and protagonist, kind of, sort of. And then if you're, this is where it goes a little deeper. He has like sort of a similar style that he likes to bring to the female form. And this is a CLBDF sort of ash can, although ash cans aren't color, right? Oh, actually interior is color, or black and white, or just pencils. So that's Brandon's sort of avatar that he does. It's this kind of rounded, not a tiger. I have tigers in the brain. Lizard-like person. That's his avatar. And then this is back when he was married. I think that's sort of the avatar of his wife. Anyway, just if you like something very different, and I can't think of other artists that really look like this. Can you guys think of any other that had this kind of style that Graham's got?
It reminds me of... Sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say it reminds me a little bit of the way Paul Pope used to do his THQ? TH...
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
It was all kind of like stream of consciousness with girls and robots and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the only artist I can think of, and I can't even remember the name, but Image put out Orc Stain.
Oh, yeah.
And it was much more gross than that. But it was close enough to that wheelhouse, and I'm totally blanking on who put Orcs. It was the creative team behind Orc Stain. But that's the only one where I don't think it's like the hugest puddle jump from what Brandon does. So
yeah, and it's gosh, I'm far more interested these days in something interesting and unique out of comics, and I kind of wish that Prophet had gone on more and that Brandon had found other projects, and I mean he may still in the hopper. I haven't kept up, but if you have a chance, he's out of Portland, does a lot of the Northwest shows. Once those shows are back, you should go check him out and tell him we told you about him. Did you guys have any too, or am I doing this from my?
I think it's just you, baby. Unless Caleb or Steve, if there's stuff you want to grab.
Well, Brian, I wanted to interject if I.
Sorry, I distracted you.
Ooh, you're going to YouTube
that
jail.
you were thinking about was I'm glitching out. The artist I was thinking, or you were thinking of, was Juan Gimenez, who was also the artist on ankle stuff.
Yes. Juan, yeah, yeah. So he just passed away recently, and it's his stuff was great because Jodorowsky did all that work like with Mobius that they were going to put into
Yeah,
Dune, and then reused it all in his ankle stuff, and found some amazing collaborators.
and it's funny. It's funny that Matt mentioned the Pope stuff. From what I saw, what you were showing, there's a little bit of like a more sleek Jim Mahfood there. Um,
Absolutely.
Huh.
yeah, it's I hate for, and again, like barely from what I could see, and I hate making any kind of connection to this. It's purely just a connection to the art, but it's like a Jim Mahfood meets Dave Sims early Cerebus stuff.
Yes.
And again,
Huh.
just making a connection to the art.
No, I think
Not the-
actually
not the-
you're not far off because I think I've heard Brandon talk. He has a podcast called like 100 Years, and I think you're right. I think actually some of those are his influences and collaborators, compatriots, whatever. So I threw this up here real quick just because it's sort of interesting. The Japan, the Eagle in Tokyo, they have these little zines there for free. And I had picked up a couple of them, and as I was going through my stack of original things, I found this. And part of it's like in good gay bar tradition, advertisements for their bars, right? So it's not entirely comics, but there is this cute little story called Nippon Danji, and it's in basically kind of just a little taste of Japanese bear culture, bara to say the least, and they definitely pull from bara in that sense. But it's not as sexual as like this is kind of the salacious cover, but this is a little bit more kind of the style you're getting. And I have it's an ongoing series, and I hope they're still doing it. From the several times I went to Japan, I picked up like the first three of these. But yeah, I'll have to put the artist's name up on the website because I don't see it on the cover. But he does a lot of their promotion stuff as well. So if you're in Japan or you go to Tokyo, go by the Eagle in Shinjuku, or not Shinjuku, the other place. Oh my God, I'll think of it in a minute. What is it?
Harajuku?
No, it is. Sorry, it is Shinjuku, not Hard. I was thinking Harajuku. Shinjuku. It's in the red light district, of course, because that's where all the good gay stuff is in Tokyo. But yeah, look for these, and again, and get your picture in front of the giant Bara mural because by Massive, that's the Bara artist. In both of the Eagles, there's actually Eagle and Eagle Blue. They have a giant mural you can take a picture with. So yeah, I'm sure none of you have this, but this was something I just grabbed because I'm like, it's appropriate. I don't know.
Inappropriately appropriate.
But yeah, I mean, I've got other stuff too, but I mean, feel free to whatever else we can talk about. I think we lost at least one of our chat people, but Dave, I guess, also has a comic crush on Mitch Gerrits.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay.
Oh, of course. Me too.
I have something. I have something weird and wonderful. If we're going through like very indie stuff, several years back, Ryan Brown, who, if you've ever met him at any con, he is one of the funniest and just, I don't want to say strange in like a bad way. He is a little strange, but he's fun to chat with because he just kind of goes off in very interesting directions. And his work is hilarious. It's surrealist, it's weird, it's wacky, it's goopy, it's silly. And several years back, he was doing a webcomic called God Hates Astronauts, and he was able to kickstart it to publish it. And I have one of the many hardcover printings that he's had, if you can actually see it here. It is a trip, to say the least, if you have a chance to read a copy and get a hold of a copy. Several years, yep, there you go. There's one of them. There's a ton of them. I think I actually have that one as well. I have multiple copies of this version of God Hates Astronauts. He did eventually do a couple series of God Hates Astronauts for Image. that came out maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. But if you can get the original complete edition, it is absolutely a hoot. The characters are bizarre. The storyline doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it kind of does at the same time. You've got imagery that just defies. I'm dropping stuff here. This defies description. Here's an exploding head. But it's wonderfully silly. One of the main villains in this, of course, is sort of like an old-timey strong man who has trained a whole bunch of wrestling bears to attack and take over the world. But it is such a great book. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for people who have not read comics, but like something a little bit more challenging from their work. But just the quality. Ryan Brown's work is just it's beautiful as it is crazy, and just a lot of fun to read.
I have to interject only because Ryan is a dear friend, and I had actually the best hero. So I've loved Heroes Con for years.
Yep.
Four of us have been there together. But let me tell you, the first Heroes Con I went to was probably the most magical experience for several reasons. First of all, because I got to hang out with Ryan Brown and his wife, Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Dear people, had such an amazing time hanging out at the hotel bar. Was the Weston bar. But that show I got to do a panel and moderate for Hickman and his collaborators. And that was also sort of like, career highlight up here, and then it's all been downhill since, but whatever. It was being able to see the show through an artist's perspective and get to know Ryan's work. And he was doing God Hates Astronauts and Burning Crusade or Burn Crusade. I never get the title right for that.
It was Furnace.
Blast Furnace. Oh my God.
Furnace.
So somehow I got Burn Crusade from, anyway, Blast Furnace. Ryan is so unique in comics because his art style is very specific and interesting, but like he is an interesting storyteller. His writing choices are so weird and so like sort of in-jokey and yet very funny, like even if you don't know what he's referencing. A lot of it's 80s stuff, but even if you don't recognize the reference, it's still really funny. Ryan is just so freaking funny. The best thing that he did recently was the with the Wizard.
Yeah.
With the writer from Star Wars now. Basically Charles Soule. Yeah.
Why I got up was Steve will remember this. I think when we got those sunglasses for that series.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they were, for the longest time, they were over by the front door, by the mantle we have at the front door, and I know I just put them away somewhere.
I know I have mine somewhere, and I don't know where.
Yeah.
So many things got jumbled in the move and got put in weird boxes, but yeah, I mean,
curse words.
Actually, yes, curse words,
which just wrapped, and I all the way through, fantastic, just almost undescribable in anti-hero's journey to hero, bizarre magic influences. Like I don't even have a good boiler elevator pitch for that book. It's so weird. But
sort of like magical alien dimension incursion into Earth. Like there's so much going on there. But you mentioned him. Charles Soule and Ryan Brown together are just always a treat. If you ever get to see a panel with the two of them at any convention, they're just funny because it's like they're kind of like old friends who kind of share a similar brain, and their writing styles are extremely different. Obviously Charles Soule is he's run the gamut with all sorts of different storylines, different characters in different books, very serious to horror to general superheroes, but you get the two of them together and it's like it's Laurel and Hardy. It is just so much fun to listen to them talk.
Did we lose Matt?
I think we lost Matt. No,
Oh.
well, I think he did pop off.
Oh no.
Oh,
Well,
no, there he is.
there we
I was
go.
trying to
Yeah.
landscape.
he's got video too. Holy crap.
No, I was trying to go landscape. I think that's the problem. Was I just audio before?
Yes,
No.
for a little while.
Oh, okay. I was able to see you.
Yeah,
we
I
can
don't know.
see you on
But
Skype.
I'm glad you're showing up now. So I did find in my little stack here Trash Brigade, which is another Ryan Brown book that he did. I have a #1 issue. So when he goes big, also Tim Seeley was involved. I guess he's the writer for this. And I have to say, I found this. I knew I had it. I absolutely knew I had this, and I'm sitting there like, it must be in this box because I have all of the. Basically, again, I have a short box of like big publisher comics that I kept, and then I had this other like sort of short box of my favorite comics, the things I'll never part with.
Aw.
So look familiar?
I was able to reach for. I did have some indie comics, but they're mostly indie comics I haven't read yet. But I do have North Bend from Scout Comics that just came out, which there's some buzz about. I haven't gotten to this yet, but the first issue of Decorum by Jonathan Hickman and Huddleston on Image.
I didn't even know that was out.
Yeah.
Like it came out, I think, the week before the shops closed.
Yeah.
Did you guys see that
yeah.
humble bundle with Hickman's work?
Yes. Yeah.
Totally,
I got it.
Totally got that, of course.
Yeah.
I have X-Ray Robot by the All Reds. Yeah,
Beautiful
I
book.
still have to read that.
Love All Reds.
And then I missed this issue, so I got this. This was the second series, and Matt and I met the creative team over in Baltimore, Psycho KO, about this robot from Alterna, which is a lot of fun. I got to read that. And then just as a recommendation, once we're all through this, for people to, if they want to sample some good stuff from the independent world for very cheap, the Black Hammer 3-for-1.
Oh yeah.
Which has reprints the first issues of Black Hammer, Sherlock, Frankenstein, and Legion of Evil, and the Quantum Age from the Black Hammer verse from Jeff Lemire. So stuff I haven't read yet, mostly.
I found another Ryan Brown treasure here.
Yes.
Goats Eat Castanets.
Castanets. Yes.
with his own little sketch thing. I have an original page from God Hates Astronauts too, of the wrestler guy you were talking about, Steve, and then the Bear Council. Yeah. I love that page so much, but I can't. It's buried somewhere. The other one I found real quick. This is obviously kind of a interestingly appropriate. I don't know, kind of horrifyingly so. It's a little ash can about Trump called The Unquotable Trump, and it's let's see. America Comics Group. I really don't even know who did this. But it's basically real Trump quotes in different styles. So like Walking Dead and Archie, but they just take those quotes and they wrap them around these existing sort of styles. And it's hilarious and horrifying. And especially right now.
Yeah.
So,
of course.
That reminds me of a lot of, Aphrodisiac by Jim Rugg.
Oh, another great. Oh,
yeah.
So
great.
Yeah. Love it.
And also some of his other stuff. Yeah. So so we went. Yeah.
I've got another one.
Okay.
And this is it's a trade, and you can actually, I believe, both. I do have both volumes of it, but. Blue, who has been on our show before, Blue Delaquante, had this amazing trade series called "Oh Human Star," which it's very, it's beautifully drawn, has a very interesting sort of hued color scheme. Technically it's a black and white comic, but it is in sort of shades of blue or red depending on the time. Because it jumps, back and forth in time. But it's a beautiful story, very human story about essentially robots or, robots who have human spirits that have been placed in them. And it's just it's a beautiful tale. Both volumes are available. I'm trying to think who actually put it out because I know
it is sort of self-published, I think. I think it's pretty much Blue's own imprint, but Matt and Caleb, if you haven't sampled this, it's a beautiful love story set against artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
and it's really one of those books where it's really hard to find something to compare it to.
Mhm.
And Blue has a very distinctive voice. I did run into, I think the current pronoun is him, um, at the last Queers and Comics conference, and I can't remember if it's if Blue goes by him or they at this point. But it's just a very unique voice that they have, and I do believe that there's still a good portion of at least the first arc of O Human Star that's up as a web comic.
Yeah.
If you want to sample it, but it's really it throws questions of gender and what is life, and I mean there's so much in there in a very very compact package, and what's beautiful is at the heart is this wonderful love story.
Yeah.
And I can't speak highly of the 2 volumes enough. It's a wonderful book.
That's
It's
awesome.
it is a very interesting meditation on sort of the romantic relationship, the history of a couple, and even what it means to procreate.
Yeah.
And that what makes a family. Literally, in this case, what makes a family. From the human spirit to sort of like a machine. It's a gorgeous book. And I have the first 2 volumes. I think it was planned for 3. I'm not sure if the 3rd volume is available yet.
I
But
don't think it is.
yeah.
I think they only had for the first 2 on sale this past summer.
Yeah.
And there was a very big gap between 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think she's
but, that's
or
how-
Blue started it in
how-
2014.
That's how it is with indie creators sometimes.
Yeah. Self-published.
When you can get to it. Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, it looked like Caleb grabbed something there.
Yeah, it did. Again, my connection's shoddy, so I don't know if people can actually hear me or not. So this is a book that I actually told Steve about a while back, and he reminded me. He said it was about making a family and the idea of procreation in a queer comic. If you haven't read this,
Where's my copy?
Waves by Ingrid Schubert and Carol Moore. It's published by like Boom's little. It's their offshoot that they do more graphic novel stuff, more realistic fiction though. This story is about a couple, and assumedly a same-sex couple, although they don't gender one of the characters, so the character may very well be trans.
Mm-hmm.
And they are a lesbian couple, and they're in the process of having kids or having a kid. For them, they're going through in vitro to do so. And we think about in vitro with relationships a lot, both in gendered queer relationships or non-gendered queer relationships. But one thing that we don't think of that actually does affect our community in ways that isn't is miscarriage. It's the loss. It's the loss of parenthood, the loss of having a child, and that's what this book is about. It is one of the most heart-touching, heartfelt, and heart-wrenching stories that I've read in a long time. It was hands down one of my favorite OGNs of last year. If you heard me on any of the podcasts, I can't say this book's praises enough, because what it does, it deals with not only the loss of parenthood, it deals with the separation that couples go through when that happens. And the book does something that I've never seen a comic do before. As things get bad, quote unquote, with this couple, as their life and their plans kind of fall apart around them, the color washes out of the story. I don't know if when the story starts, it's very when the story first begins, you've just got these bright pinks, and it's as the story goes on, like Steve's showing you, when things are kind of falling apart around them, when they're just sinking into despair, it goes to really washed out tones. And I've really never seen a book play with color like that, because for me, color before color is like the base when a book has color. It's kind of like the base of a comic. It's keeping the rhythm. It's setting the tone. It kind of bridges the gap between the lines and the storyteller. The way that the bass guitar bridges the gap between the rhythm and the tones of the book, and it's just magical. And
Mhm.
in the end, it's not a happy story. So I don't, and I'm not going to ruin the end of it, but it doesn't come back to a place where you're going to feel good about what's happening at the end of it. But there is some closure, and that's delivered through the color coming back to the story, and to the characters coming back to a place where they can, if that makes sense, where they're they can go on another day and they can continue their life and face other challenges. But getting to that point is hard. Sometimes it just feels like you can't just be, and that's what this book is largely about.
Mhm.
So again, check it out if you haven't. It's an amazing read.
I second that. I second
Oh,
that. And
yeah.
and I think I actually, thanks to Caleb, I do have my copy. So thank you again, Caleb, because this was a beautiful book, especially hot on heels of reading the book by Lucy Knisley that talked about similar topics of loss, miscarriage as well, and it was just a great companion piece to that. So thank you.
Okay. Matt, did you grab something?
I haven't read anything that doesn't have an X in the title in a while. I can't afford to read anything else because there's so many goddamn X-Men books. So last week I read The Vision, and that was great. I've actually seen a couple of really good movies recently. If you're into talking about one of those, has
not?
anybody here seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
No.
The other half has. I haven't.
I bawled my eyes out. I usually despise movies about painters. I just don't understand how to make the story of painting very interesting in a movie narrative, and so usually it's exaggerated in all the wrong ways, and it's not really relatable to me. This was fascinating. It's the story of a painter in the 18th century who has to do a portrait. The reason for the portrait is very interesting. It puts her at odds with the subject who doesn't want her portrait done. And it just gets very emotionally complex and intense. The performances from the cast, the lead actress in it is so entrancing. I've never seen her in anything before, but she has these strong features, and she's a great person to anchor your experience with the story. And I just love the way it was shot too. It's gorgeous.
All right.
That sounds awesome.
I think we have it, so maybe that'll push it to the top of the queue. What were you gonna say, Brian?
No, I was just gonna reiterate that sounds like I need a good indie film after watching Parasite and then Midsummer, curiously back to back almost. I need something like that to, yeah. What was it at
Sounds like
streaming or is it what? Where'd you see it on?
I bought it on iTunes. It was actually a pretty good price on iTunes. I was going to see it at the local film festival, but that also got canceled because of coronavirus.
Yes. Oh, sad.
All right, well, we're approaching 11 p.m. over here on the East Coast, so I guess we should start wrapping this up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. If you are familiar with the bear community, when you woof at a fella, that means you find them attractive, and we're going to provide something to you that we find attractive. Be it a comic book or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. So I guess we should extend it to the guest first. And Matt, this might be on the spot, but do you have anything that would qualify as a Wolf of the Week for you?
I am thrilled that What We Do in the Shadows is back on, and
Yeah.
I find Nando to be the most delicious vampire I've ever seen.
Yes.
So my
Yes.
wolf is going to Nando this week.
All right, cool. Let's go to Steve next. Steve, what's your Wolf of the Week?
I second the wolf of What We Do in the Shadows, but also another new show that just started. It's on Sunday nights on HBO. Is Run, starring Merritt Weaver and Donald Gleason, about a man and a woman who have an agreement from their college days that if either of them texts the word "run," they are to drop everything and meet in New York to go on a cross-country journey. And it is, so far after the first episode, setting up to be an extremely crazy, wonderful show. Humorous, dramatic, sad, action-packed, possibly. We don't know. Lots of mystery to it. And also, it is co-produced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge of Fleabag fame, who does make an appearance in the series at some point as well. So, Run on HBO.
All right, let's go to Bryan. Bryan, what's your Wolf?
So I just remembered as we were talking, there is a new but ongoing project that's finally coming out into the world from Yoshi Yoshitani, who is an artist that I got to meet at Heroes, again, Heroes Con. And I have their tarot deck, Major Arcana, in individual cards that I bought for my boyfriend Brandon. And they just posted, Yoshi just posted that the major and minor are all going to be collected and published. So if you are into the tarot or you're interested in sort of unique mythologically oriented art, that's basically what they're doing, is they're taking each tarot and linking it to a story from mythology. It's a gorgeous set. The Major Arcana, at least, we had it up in Brandon's old place, and it looked great. And so now, actually, as we're doing this, I was like, oh yeah, I should buy that. And it comes out in September. So, if you're interested, Yoshitani, and we'll get a link up on Facebook. Steve, I know you've seen this art. I think Matt, you saw it too. Like, just great visual style of it, very cartoony, but the tarot is rendered into such a unique and cool sort of story per card. Definitely recommended.
Okay. And moving over to Caleb. Caleb, what's your Wolf?
My wolf of the week goes out to kind of the entire comics community right now. If you've been on Twitter or you've been on social networks, you've probably seen a hashtag called Creators for Comics trending. So what artists, writers, podcasters, anything in comics, kind of what they're all doing is they are finding a way to auction off something, be it art, a script, a live stream. I know there's a podcast that I'm a big fan of, along with this one, is the 11 O'Clock Comics podcast. They're doing their own thing where they auction off, like, you can sit in the fourth chair for a little bit. So it's kind of everybody finding these creative ways. And what they're doing is they're funneling all the money back through something called the Bink Foundation, which is in turn going to give that money back to local comic shops, which they're hurting right now. And especially in places where stay-at-home orders are happening. And so all of this money is kind of funneling back from the community to the people who really need it the most, and on some level who is a foundation of our comics community. So big woof out to everybody who is participating in that. And I'm broke, so because college student, so I'm getting bit out of everything, but it's really cool seeing the comics community come together to kind of take care of our own, and I think we need that.
Okay, cool. And I think it's worth mentioning some of the people who are behind Bink, including gay creators like Phil Jimenez, certainly allies like Sam Humphries and Bendis. Just how organically this came about. It's just a really inspiring story, and one of those things where you just step back and it's like, God, everything about this makes sense. So it's a very nice development, and yeah, I did peek at some of those auctions. I'm like, oh, enough for this boy right now. No, but
I tried very early, and it became very clear it was not for me.
but those are also the kind of auctions you don't mind losing. So
Right.
So for my wolf of the week, and this is a bit of a preview, one of the with Bryan being absent for so long, for a long time it was just Steve and myself, kind of steering the boat. And during that period, one of our favorite guests was Jack Foster, of the book Gun, and we have right here in my hands the Gun graphic novel. So my wolf of the week is to grab this. I'm not sure if it's still the case, but this was in single issue form fairly cheap on Comixology because it was chosen for one of the Comixology spotlight sales. May not be the case right now, but you certainly can order it through Jack's website at Reckless Eyeballs Press. And Jack's going to be on the show next week again. And just apart from being a really cool creator, he's also one of the funniest people I've ever encountered. And Gun is this sort of, I think the best description of this is a grindhouse version of a superhero, of a more a supervillain film. It's a wild ride, and with the Ringo Awards that are coming up, which I believe you can vote on until June. This has been submitted for Ringo Awards, and just make sure you consider that if you do go on to the online vote for Jack's work here. So that's my wolf, and yeah, he's going to be joining us next week.
Yay.
So, yeah.
Yay.
All right. Well, I guess we should wrap this up now. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. And if you want to listen to us, naturally catch us through iTunes, through Stitcher Radio, or some of the other podcatching platforms. Matt, it's been an unexpected pleasure. So glad you're on tonight. Really, really so happy to see you. You tiger now. You tiger.
Arr, arr.
Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm waiting for
And I'm
Caleb.
Caleb Busan.
All right, I'll do it.
I'm the co-host formerly known as Matt.
Oh,
And Caleb, let's get you in there.
And I'm Caleb who.
Okay. You're going to hear a woof and an explosion if you're listening. All right. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye.